Welcome to the University of Findlay Art and Culture Show. I am your host, Sharinda, and today we are very happy to have on set with us Mr. Seth Butler. Welcome, Seth.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I've been excited to bring you on set because you are a newer employee here at the university.
Yep.
And so welcome to campus.
Thank you.
And even with you being brand new, you have had a slew of cool things happening throughout the semester. So it's kind of been a challenge to get you in here. So I'm glad it's worked out.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You are very welcome. And you have been other places. You look like you're 14 going on 20, which is a wonderful gift to have in your back pocket. But you have been other places and very successful in the world of higher ed. Would you like to share that with us, please? Where have you been and
Sure.
What have you seen in the world of higher ed?
Yeah, so I actually started out my career in higher ed at Colorado State University.
Which is a beautiful university.
It is. If you've never been to Fort Collins,
Yep, love it.
It's a great campus, great community. I pursued my bachelor's degree in human development and family studies, and then went on to pursue a master's degree in student affairs and higher education.
So and we are glad you did.
Yeah, no, I love higher ed. And it's funny because I was like a typical student athlete jock. Was like, I'll figure out my life afterwards. But in light of almost losing the ability to participate in my sport, I had to think about what do I want out of my college experience. And then,
faster reality check.
Yes. Quicker than I would have wanted to experience. So that kind of jump-started my career into higher ed, being on college campus. So within grad school, I had unique opportunities to serve out of the president's office and the VPSA office, led a group of students, a multicultural advisory committee that reported directly to the president. I was the advisor for that throughout grad school. And then when I worked full-time for CSU, they actually asked me to come back and advise the graduate student of that committee because of the success I had in bringing that program back up and running.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so there's a lot of unique experience I was able to have starting out at CSU.
So what did that program look like as you developed it and under your tutelage it grew?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's one of the things I'm excited about here at UF as well, hopefully down the road to do something similar. But the crux of the program was really a group of students who make up a lot of different demographics. So you had minority students, you had students from SGA, students from Greek life, student athletes, and then historically disenfranchised students. So resources for disabled students, students from the LGBTQ community, and then students of color. And so there's about 18 to 20 students who have made up all of these different identities. And the whole point of this advisory committee was their boots on the ground. They're having all of these experiences day to day on campus. And every semester, twice a semester, we would report out to the president and say, this is what we're experiencing. These are different challenges that this particular group of students are facing. And then by having the ear of the president, he was able to institute initiatives to change campus culture. So a few examples that came out of that committee were for resources for disabled students. Obviously, we're in Colorado, and so a lot of snow, right?
Yeah, and hills.
Yes, right? Mm-hmm. So for students who are physically disabled and wheelchair-bound, the process for snow removal on campus, for whatever reason, they shoveled the ramps last. And so this was something that we brought to the president. We were able to get the director of facilities and management over there, and they changed the protocol to shovel the ramps first so that students weren't stuck outside in the snow. And so that's
everyone
simple.
can get in.
Yes.
If that's shoveled.
Yep.
No matter what your ability is, everyone can get in.
Yeah, so addressing issues like that, accessibility on campus for that particular group. And so there's a lot of unique things that we were able to do that I was excited to participate on there. Yeah.
Well, and it's always fun when you're hearing from the students because when it's a concern and they see that concern be removed, the encouragement they receive to be able to continue to maybe breach some of those subjects and topics that are real concerns, but at first they're afraid, will I be judged? Will I be penalized? Right. Should I really trust the system? And when little steps are taken and they see that their voice has purpose and it's a positive outcome, that's teaching a skill for the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So that was at Colorado.
Yep.
And then did you work at Bowling Green State University for a little bit?
I did,
yeah.
yes.
So what did you do there?
Yeah, so I actually moved into career services industry.
Okay.
So
Which was still part of higher ed.
Yes, yeah. So prior to leaving CSU, I worked in the athletic department for at-risk student athletes. Part of what I did there was helping to prep them outside of their sport. As a former student athlete, knowing the importance of that.
And so I'm going to interrupt for just a second.
Yeah.
The at risk, that doesn't mean necessarily, like when people hear that, they put lots of different labels on that.
Sure.
So could you clarify what at risk means for the student athlete?
Sure. So when I'm talking about at risk, in my role, we're talking academically at risk. So these are student athletes who they need to be eligible to play. A lot of them are first generation students. A lot of them came from schools that just weren't academically prepared to handle the rigor of a Research 1 tier institution at CSU. And so we had this learning assistance program for student athletes that fell into that demographic where they just needed a little bit more prep time to succeed academically. And so I had a caseload of students where it was academic preparation as well as career preparation outside of their sport. So that really sparked desire within me to want to do that, not only for the student athlete population, but for students that don't fall into that demographic. So then I ended up working at BGSU in the Career Center there for a little bit, doing that type of work for all students there at that campus.
And so in doing that, did that include looking at internships? Did it deal with building relationships off campus for businesses who were looking to employ students while they were in college as well as right out of college?
Yeah.
What did that look like?
Yeah, so it was a slew of things, right? So there's the student-to-student contact, where I'm helping them with a resume or a cover letter or a purpose statement for grad school. So that type of professionalism that they needed in those documentations. But I served in an employer relations role. And so I was actually working a lot with employer relations where I'm talking to, let's say, representatives from Amazon or Apple or T-Mobile, getting them to either engage on campus physically or virtually so that our students have more exposure to opportunities that are beyond the Midwest area where BG is located. And so that was a heavy part of my role. And then doing programming around that where, hey, I'm going to go into this classroom, talk about what we do and the opportunities that they have if they were to come and see us, and helping get an internship set up or getting connected with an opportunity that's in their field of study.
So obviously you have had quite the gambit of exposure and training, and as you speak, it's all been filled with passion.
Yeah.
And so the University of Findlay is so excited that you chose to join our team here, and you're going to be in similar yet very different roles again.
Yeah.
Well, you are. It's already happened.
Yep.
And so as Director of Intercultural Student Services, you actually walked into a position where your predecessor had programming set up because he was just as awesome as you are. So you had the opportunity to be involved with programming as the point person, but basically it was already done, and be exposed to some awesome things happening on campus.
Yeah.
So one of those things, which was right after you started, was our celebration of Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes.
And the University of Findlay does a little bit different celebration because it's not just for one day, it's for an entire week.
Right.
And in addition to that, he's never far from our thoughts with many of the programs and opportunities that there are on campus. But would you like to touch on what that looked like this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is always interesting when you're in the field of higher ed, coming in the spring semester rather than the fall semester.
Sure.
Typically, if you have the summer to kind of see what the whole academic year is going to look like.
Yes.
So it was jumping right in, coming in just after January, and then MLK week being just a couple weeks after I got here. But really fortunate in Dr. Braylock and the things that he had set up already. And it was a matter of just kind of picking up the pieces and moving along. Really cool to interact with our keynote speaker for the week, who was Daniel Hill. He was a pastor from Chicago, and he focused on reconciliation within the church from a racial lens. What do Christians, what does the evangelical space look like when addressing this topic of race, and how do we honor Martin Luther King Jr. and what we're doing in that context. So he was here for a few days, and it wasn't just the keynote that happened where all campus was invited, but he spent some time, the first night he actually was here, he spent a couple hours at dinner with students that were reading his book. And so for them to read his book and then sit down and have dinner with him.
A conversation with that author.
Yeah, really cool. And then he was in several classrooms, ate lunch and dinner with different demographics of students. So that week was really, really impactful for a lot of folks, myself included. And I think it was really good for the campus.
Yes, and I had the opportunity to go to the all-campus presentation he did, and oh my goodness, my eyes were opened, and it was a wonderful, positive challenge that I don't think there's been a day since that presentation that with news coverage or something I'm hearing someone explain or flipping through the television and hearing a pastor that I am re-questioning or really paying close attention to how things are being worded. It was just amazing.
Yeah.
Very thought-provoking.
Absolutely.
So, and then in addition to him being here for the whole week, there were other programs that were being co-sponsored and supported by your area.
Yep.
In addition, one of them being the mobile food pantry took place that week, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
So will you please tell our viewers what a mobile food pantry is?
Sure. So a mobile food pantry, instead of going to like a traditional pantry in a store or in a kitchen, a mobile food pantry is the ability for those in the community that would need that resource. It's happening mobily, right?
So it comes to them basically.
Exactly.
Or closer to them in their neighborhood
Exactly.
setting. Okay.
So there are different ways that it could happen, right? So there could be a van literally with a bunch of resources, and that van drives around. And it could be a drive-through where we have a station set up kind of in a solid place, and then people in their mobile automobiles or walking, they go through. So it's a drive-through type of resource where it's accessible to people who need it rather than something that is out of their reach. So we either go to them, or if they have the ability, they can come to us depending on how it's set up. Yeah.
And so the one that happened here at the university, it was set up here through a truck, correct? Like a semi-truck backed up, and it had all of the food sources that were needed.
Yep.
And then for families who were waiting in line, in past years, I don't know if this happened this year, I know that some of the students would volunteer to set up a arts and craft area or interacting with the students to keep them busy so that mom and dad or the parent of the child, whether that be an aunt, uncle, whomever, could focus on staying in line and getting the resources that they were there for. And so it was a positive experience for everyone.
Yeah, one of the cool things that happens out of that office is the amount of volunteers that we have from students, which is really encouraging for me in the work that I do to see really younger students who are passionate about service, who are passionate about diversity, who are passionate about accessibility, and they're stepping up to the plate to engage in the opportunities that they have to really see this stuff happen tangibly, and that's really cool.
It is. And the office you're referring to is the Office of Community Service and Engagement.
Yes.
And again, that's a special office. There aren't a lot of universities that have a specific functioning office just for the sole purpose of experiential learning and community service.
Right.
So yes, and you're both housed in the same building, which is called the Buford Center.
Yeah, Buford Center for Diversity and Service. So it's my office, Intercultural Student Services, and then the third one is International Education.
Yes.
And so those three really work in tandem in a lot of programs throughout the year.
And another one of those programs that you got to participate in this year was an alternative spring break that was hosted out of the Buford Center.
Correct.
And so tell us a little bit about that. I know this is the second year that this location was chosen to participate, and that was a decision made by the student leaders that had participated last year and wanted to step up and be more in the leadership role this year.
Yeah.
So, which is again what you were saying, we have students who are open, they're passionate, and they're not waiting for graduation to try and take an active position. They're doing it now.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So the alternative spring break that occurred this year was in Cleveland, Ohio. And the organization that we partnered with in the service that we were doing was called Building Hope in the City. And Building Hope in the City is this umbrella organization that has a few different facets to it. One of them is called the Hope Center, which we spent a couple days here where it centers on serving refugees and immigrants. And we learned a lot about the refugee population, what's the difference between a refugee, an immigrant, an asylum seeker, how does that compare to what we hear in the media and things like that. And there's 20 plus million refugees worldwide, and the average time that a refugee spends in a camp is 17 years, right?
Wow.
And so we learn about this demographic of people, and then we can serve. And so the students had the ability to go to these classes where there's pre-literate all the way to advanced, and we're helping these refugees learn English and kind of assimilate into society so that they can still live their life and try and have a productive life despite having to flee from a dangerous location. So that was the first place that we visited and served at, which was really, really cool to see just the love in the place where those leading those groups just cared about, hey, your home was taken away, or you don't have a home to go back to. Why don't you come to the Hope Center? And it really did provide a sense of hope. The second one that we got to partner with under that umbrella was Common Threads. And so Common Threads is a social enterprise, and that it's service-based, and it's like a thrift store where all of the funds that are made from the thrift store go back into the organization so that they can continue to serve low-income, refugee, and demographics of folks who are historically disenfranchised. So it was such a neat experience over the course of the week to partner with that organization.
And I know some of the students were really excited about the tutoring side of it for the people getting ready to take their tests to become U.S. citizens, and being able to work with them on English, as well as all of the information that they needed to be able to share via a test. And for some of the students, they're international students here, so they found that fascinating. But then our American students, how humbling it was for them, because they had grown up here. This is their homeland, and so many of those answers they didn't know themselves. So that was an eye-opening experience for some of them, I know.
Yeah, it was. And just to learn about the process and how rigorous it is.
It's intense.
It is, right? And so, but then there's like these celebrations that happen for the refugees that finally get citizenship. And to be a citizen, I think we often take it for granted too, because without citizenship, there's a lot of stuff that you can't do, a lot of things that you don't have access to, right? And so when someone finally, who was by no fault of their own, had to leave from where they were to be here now and then obtain citizenship, that's such a monumental move in their life. And there's celebrations that occur over that, which is really cool to see.
And it's great that these centers exist, because there were many years where we didn't have these centers. It was one family trying to do, and so they could only touch point a few people. And so we had a lot of people that were injured mentally, emotionally, and physically from where they came. And it's so wonderful that we have people that this is their passion and their calling, and they've been able to create centers such as what Cleveland has. And I know there's a few others in our state that are just as active in other parts of larger communities. But I'm so thankful that our students had the opportunity to do that 2 years in a row, continue to build that bond with that facility and those relationships, because even if people don't stay in touch, what took place within those weeks will always keep them connected through memories.
Absolutely.
And that's so much a part of the learning. It takes place in the classroom, and then it's our jobs to take what is in the classroom and make it realities for our students.
That hands-on experience is key.
So what else? What else is going on in
Yeah.
the area of intercultural student services? I know that Black Student Union has an annual dance they do every year
Yep.
around the Valentine's Day,
Yep.
and that is to celebrate beyond Valentine's Day.
Right.
So can you share a little bit of what that goal is and why students are honored at that dance? Because it's really special.
It is.
I love going to it.
Yeah, so this year was the Black Tie Affair, so it's kind of like a Roaring 20s theme. It is sponsored by Black Student Union, and it's really an opportunity to celebrate a little bit of Black culture and achievements that are happening within that demographic of students. And it's really cool when you have your peers who are recognizing and celebrating and nominating you for these things, because a lot of times that doesn't happen, right? And so to have a space where that does happen and to have fun and do it is really cool.
And alum get to come back for it. They're
Exactly.
invited to come back.
Yep.
So they get to continue to celebrate
Yeah.
what they were a part of and know how important this is for the students and network.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that happened in February was the Soul Food Dinner, which happens every year.
Yes.
Again, it's in February, so Black History Month, and what happens there is being able to provide quote-unquote traditional Black culture type of meals. And what we were able to do out of our office was create a little bit of culture cards that describe like where this meal came from and why it's considered soul food. What does that term even mean? So that as students are eating good food, they can look at the card on their table and say like, oh, I had no idea that this is why greens were made, or this is why this is considered part of soul food. And so
do you want to fill our audience viewers in a little bit on why soul food is called soul food?
Yeah, so I mean, it's food for the soul, right? It's uplifting. It provides a little
Comfort
bit.
food.
It is, right?
Yeah.
And so when you look back at the days of slavery, right, and the conditions that that Black people were in at that time, there wasn't a whole lot to be excited about, right?
They had their music
Yep.
that kept them going.
Yeah.
And their food.
Right, and so like and a lot of the food with the ingredients, a lot of it was hand-me-downs, or a lot of it was things that were cheap, and so it wasn't like this high class.
It was the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to be able to take something where like you get the worst of the worst food, you're not getting these high class ingredients, and to make something out of it where it created community, people are like, oh man, this is good. And they had to be creative, because with just greens, there's not a whole lot of flavor to just greens, but they had to be creative with
a little bit of bacon grease.
Yeah, it's like
a little
all
bit
these
of
things,
onion,
right?
yeah.
And so that's really the essence of it, is that it provides food for the soul. If you can have a good meal, even now, after a long day, if you go home and have a good meal, it really feeds your soul. And so that's kind of the essence of soul food.
And part of it you touched on also is the fellowship, because a lot of times it wasn't just one family sitting down to eat, it was bringing resources together, the women cooking in the kitchen, and then everyone coming together and enjoying that meal together, so you were able to have that fellowship over the food too.
Exactly.
And then oftentimes ended with a community sing at the end, so great. So we've talked about the dance, we've talked about the Soul Food annual dinner. Because like you said, you're starting in the middle of an academic year,
Right.
but you're getting a real good taste of the passion and the investment and the fusion that's already taking place. So, and you mentioned this at the very beginning, where you would like to see parts of your resources go in growing new committees.
Yeah.
But what else do you see for the intercultural student services area?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that I thought about already. One of them being something similar to a student advisory committee, whether that be to the president or somebody else on campus, really having a group of students that are collaborating together, an intercultural group that fights for each other, that advocates for each other about making sure that things are inclusive and welcoming on campus. Right now, that happens in pockets, but there isn't a conglomerate group where we're all going to get together and we're going to address this issue, or we're going to try and add this piece to the campus culture. So that's something that I really like to explore and see if there's the ability to do that.
And I think some of those pockets are really excited about that
Yes.
also, with the conversations that are already happening.
Exactly, yeah. So I think there's some low-hanging fruit there because there already is a lot of passionate students who want to engage in this area. I want to extend the conversation beyond students, though. A lot of times on campus you have, whether it be Black Student Union or Pride Resource Center or Resources for Disabled Students. I mean, you have these pockets of students who are really passionate, right? And even if they get together, a lot of times it's centered on the student experience. I want to have the faculty, I want to have the staff, I want to have the greater community of Findlay be engaged in these conversations as well.
Sure.
Because that really impacts longevity of culture. Because if you have a cohort of students who are passionate and that cohort leaves,
Moves.
the next
And they will graduate.
they will graduate, right?
We have to have other students that they are training and
Yeah.
getting them exposure so they feel safe to step in.
Exactly. And you want that to be woven into your interactions with faculty, right? And interactions with staff. So one of the things that I'm also looking at is doing an open mic series throughout the academic year where faculty, students, and staff can do, whether it be spoken word or poetry or just sharing their experiences pertaining to diversity and inclusion. Because one thing to hear from like my office, right? Like, well, Seth is supposed to say that because that's his role, right? But then when you hear from your pharmacy faculty, you're like, oh wow, I had no idea. What you're doing is you're opening up that conversation beyond the circles that it typically happens in. So then it becomes a greater campus conversation. And the more that we can weave these conversations into campus, the more we're going to create a culture that values and actually takes action on diversity and inclusion. So I'm excited to bring that into play. And then a few different programs for students. There's a leadership program that I want to develop for disenfranchised students that touches on not just academic support, but social and career support. So leveraging some of my career services background as well. And then I really want to revamp the peer mentor program that's currently in existence. I want to do some things there where it has a larger presence on campus so that...
Throughout the academic year.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I know it's really strong as students are getting here before orientation weekend, because the peer mentor program is to provide students an opportunity to work with students that are farther along in their experience, as well as faculty and staff, so that they feel acclimated and safe and ready for the experience. And typically these are students that are first generation students and or are coming from different socioeconomic settings that the University of Findlay would be really an overwhelming surprise. So helping to get that process started before they start in the classrooms. And yes, I know that there's been a lot of requests that continue with the peer mentoring through the academic year, the first year.
Yeah, so there's some things I have in place there with providing a little more structure, a way to nominate a student. So if there's a student who'd be an awesome mentor, right now it kind of happens word of mouth.
Right.
And that's great because it kind of has a grassroots feel to it. But if someone never hears about it and they would be great addition to the program, how does that person get involved? And so there's some logistical components that I'm working on right now to weave in. Hopefully that will be ready by the start of this upcoming fall.
That's exciting.
Yes.
And I want to step back real quick for the community involvement and the weaving into the tapestry that you were mentioning, because again, there are pockets that they're ready and they're waiting for that invitation. So it seems that this is all going to be success for the university and for our student body and for our future students, thinking about this becoming their home for a while, as well as for our current students that are here. So exciting.
It is. I'm really excited.
And we are excited to have you here. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
If someone is interested in talking with you, what is your contact information? Could you provide that real quickly, slowly, so that they can write it down?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm located in the Buford Center for Diversity and Service. And then I can be reached at my email is the best way. And my last name is Butler. So the easiest way to remember it is Butler with an S at findlay.edu. So it would be BUTLERS at findlay.edu. And I'm really responsive, and I welcome all of the type of interaction that anyone would want to provide for me.
And I have no doubts that's the case. You're a wonderful team player, and we thank you for taking time out of your hectic, crazy schedule right now to come in so that we could introduce you to our greater community,
Sure.
our viewers, and we look forward to following up with you down the road and celebrating all of the things that are being accomplished.
All right, I appreciate it.
And we thank you for tuning in today. We look forward to the next time. Until then, be well.